something that we want to try to get here in the state of Illinois. And at this point, it's actually even reaching out into the federal courts. Senator Chuck Grassley here from just across the river from the state of Iowa, is kind of trying to make federal courts transparent as he can by introducing a Senate bill. And I contacted his office. He was unable to join us today, but he did send us a statement via video, and we'd like to start with that if possible.
Hello, everybody. I'm Senator Chuck Grassley from your neighboring state of Iowa. I very much appreciate your discussion of cameras in the courtrooms during your annual conference. I'm the author of legislation in the United States Senate that would expand public access to federal courtrooms by allowing cameras in the courtrooms during judicial proceedings. I'm glad to have Senator Durbin's support for this bill as well. This initiative is about making government more open and more transparent. It would contribute to the public's understanding of America's judicial system that is now too often cloaked in secrecy. Greater transparency would lead to greater accountability, and that reflects the views of our nation's founders about the federal judiciary having limited power in our system of government. The Sunshine in the Courtroom bill specifically would allow chief judges of the federal trial appellate courts to permit cameras in their courtroom. It also would direct the Judicial Conference, which is the conference that makes policy for the court system, to draft non-binding guidelines for judges regarding cameras. And it would direct the Judiciary Conference to issue mandatory guidelines for protecting witnesses, such as undercover officers, victims of crime, and victims' families when exposure. Although our bill has not yet passed the full Senate, progress is being made. Nearly every state now allows cameras in state courtrooms, including Illinois. Iowa has a long history of allowing media coverage in its courtrooms, and I understand that as recently as February, the first live coverage of an appellate court hearing was broadcast. Studies and surveys from these state-level experiences confirm that electronic media coverage of trials boosts public understanding of the court system without interfering with those court proceedings. Even the U.S. Supreme Court was convinced, at the urging of Senator Schumer and me, to release the audio from the 2000 Florida presidential election matter immediately following the oral argument. The American people are demanding more accountability in their government, and rightfully so. So the time is right to pass the Sunshine in the Courtroom bill and bring transparency to a branch of our federal government that very few see or know the inner workings of.
And thank Senator Grassley's office for helping us get that statement from him. And hopefully this bill will continue to move forward in the Senate and then into the U.S. House, and possibly at some point land on President Obama's desk, where we may have the ability to have some federal transparency in the federal courts. But today we also want to focus on state courts. As I said, this is an issue in Illinois that we've been kind of, for lack of a better term, fighting towards, and hopefully might be able to have at some point. The state of Iowa has actually had it for a couple of decades, if I remember right. And so our panel today comes from the great Alpers state just across the river. Two of our members on the panel are working in the courtroom and have been able to witness this. And our third panelist is someone who works in a local newsroom here and is also a big part of deciding which local station will have coverage at that moment. And Chief Judge Bobbi Alpers, here to my left, first to my left, of Davenport was appointed to the bench in 1992 and named to the chief judge position in 2006. Born in Vinton, Iowa, she received her bachelor's degree in 1973 from the University of Dubuque. Went on to earn a master's in law degree from the University of Iowa. After graduation, she clerked for the 7th Judicial District. She also served as an assistant Scott County attorney and practiced law as a sole practitioner. She's a member of the Scott County and Iowa Bar Associations, as well as the Iowa Judges Association, the National Women Association of Women Judges, the American Judicial Society, and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. She currently is the Chief Judge of Iowa's 7th District, which includes Scott County and the Davenport area. In the middle is Mr. Mike Walton. He has worked with the Scott County Attorney's Office for the past 22 years as a major case felony prosecutor. In 2007, he became the county attorney, which is the equivalent to a state's attorney here in the state of Illinois. Born and raised in Davenport, where he currently lives with his wife, Gail, and their 3 children. He has graduated from Winona State University in Hamlin. I do apologize. Right. University of Law. University School of Law, and is a member of the Iowa Academy of Trial Lawyers in Scott County and Iowa Bar Associations. And thirdly, Mr. Mike Ortiz is currently the assignment manager, but soon to be co-chief photographer at the local NBC station here, KWQC. He also serves as the media coordinator for the Iowa 7th District. He grew up in the Quad Cities in Silvis, graduated from St. Ambrose here in Davenport, and has worked at all 3 of the local stations at one point or another, has been primarily with KWQC. He's received numerous awards from the Illinois Broadcasters Association, Iowa Broadcasters, and the Iowa Broadcast News Association, our sister organization in Iowa, and the National Press Photographers Association. I'd like to start with Chief Judge Alpers. As a judge in the area, cameras are from time to time in your courtroom. And do you think about the cameras when you're making a ruling, or has it become something that you see them so much that it's an afterthought and it's kind of, you don't worry about it? Is there any apprehension when a camera comes in? Feel free to use the mic if you want to.
Well, I think I can probably speak loudly enough that everyone can hear me. I would, first of all, thank your association for inviting me to participate today. I appreciate the opportunity. I would say that I am not sure when the rules for expanded media coverage actually were initiated in the state of Iowa, but I know they were in place when I began practicing law, which was 1983. So I think they go back into the very early 80s or late 70s. We have used these rules for so long that I would say as a judge or a lawyer, I think that we don't really give a lot of thought to this. It's something that we expect. We don't use them for every case. We use them for cases, I guess, that we think people might have some interest in by virtue of the fact you and your news media outlet make applications to have the expanded media coverage. You make those with Mike Ortiz, who has to be like my best friend because he screens out everything and answers all the questions and helps to do all of the work that needs to be done. I think that once we get started on a trial, and usually we might, if we have expanded media coverage, we might have a brief session on that before we open things up for court. But I think as far as the lawyers and the judges go, we're all pretty comfortable with having the cameras there. In my own experience, after about the first 20 minutes, I completely forget that the camera is there. And part of that is because we have rules that are very restrictive and very specific, and we make people follow the rules so that the camera doesn't become the big deal. The camera is there for a great purpose. We just shouldn't be focusing on it.
Mr. Walton, obviously you're prosecuting some of these cases that could possibly draw the news station's interest into having a camera there. Do you make any changes to your approach when you know that a camera will be in the courtroom, or again, is it something that it's been there so regularly that it's something that you don't even think about and you just would pursue the case as if you were in the state of Illinois where we don't have that ability?
The only thing that it might change would be consideration given to victims or perhaps confidential source type witnesses. You might take some consideration in order that you present those witnesses. Obviously, ahead of time, you have to advise those witnesses that there's going to be media in the courtroom and possibly cameras. Iowa has a rule, Iowa Rule of Court 25, that really works very well, and it sets out the parameters of the cameras in the courtroom. You can't, for instance, photograph jurors. You can't photograph sex abuse victims or any type of victim or witness, well, primarily victims related to sex abuse. So the rule really works very well. And like Judge Alpers, I forget that the cameras are even there. It's not my concern. I'm not an actor, obviously. So it's not my job to present something to the camera. My job is to present something to the court or present something to the jury. And the way the courtroom is set up anyway, you have in front of the bench where the lawyers are and the witnesses and the jury and everything taking place, and then on the other side of the rail, so to speak, is the public and the cameras. And I don't really have any concern for what's happening back there with the cameras. I'm focused on the witness, the judge, and the jury.
Have you ever had an assistant state's attorney that's new to your office that may have had some questions about that type of situation where they may be prosecuting a smaller case that may or may not have some media interest?
Well, again, we're not, you're in front of the camera all the time, or most of you are in front of the camera quite a bit. We're not. So there's understandably some discomfort for people to think that there's a camera videotaping everything they do. And my advice to them is just ignore it. It's first of all, they could be in there all day and there's going to be about 20 seconds of them appearing, if at all. And so it's not necessary to think that this whole thing is some sort of movie. But just to do their jobs, forget about the existence of the camera. And we've never had problems. I don't know that anybody's ever objected.
Mr. Ortiz, you're obviously on the other side of this situation where you're working with photographers, reporters at these cases occasionally, especially now going back into photography. And occasionally we do have younger reporters or reporters who may be new to the area who may not have ever had that type of coverage before. What kind of advice do you give your reporters before they head out to the Scott County Courthouse or another courthouse in Iowa? What kind of advice do you have for them to use, how to use the material?
Well, one of my jobs is to make sure that everything goes right, and that the judge and prosecutor and everybody in court, that they don't have any problems. We've had very few problems, and I always try and show somebody, or I always try and go down to the courthouse whenever there's somebody new, or if anybody has any questions. I usually try to be down there at some point to try and make sure that everything is going well. In Iowa, you are allowed 2 cameras, but in Scott County and in the 7th Judicial District, we're only allowed 1 camera, which I think actually works better. With technology, the way technology is changing now, we're kind of getting into an area where everybody's gone to HD now, so it's a little more difficult for us to share audio and video. But as far as usually if somebody calls, I usually either try and ask a question, is somebody new, do they know the rules? And if they don't, and there is a problem and I'm not there, I usually will get a phone call right away, which then I try to address. right away. Because one thing we don't want to do is interfere with anything that the judge and the prosecutor are trying to do, and want to make sure that they don't have any problems. That's the last thing we want them to be worried about. So it's always important for me to at least make sure that folks know the rules and that they know what they're supposed to be doing, and basically just be the fly on the wall and not, be noticed. We have certain areas in the courtroom that we need to be in, and every once in a while somebody doesn't understand that. But I'll get a phone call every now and then, but we try and straighten it out right away. And Judge Alpers and Mike, they both have been very good about letting us have cameras in the courtroom.
Quickly, can you talk a little bit about, since it is a one-camera situation here in Scott County, how you and the other assignment editors and news directors kind of talk about who's going to be covering the case what day? Will it be Channel 6, KWQC that covers the case primarily, and then sharing the video with the other stations, or would Channel 4 be? And kind of how the selection goes.
Well, usually, if somebody is interested in a case, they'll contact me, let me know that they're interested in the case. And if they don't have information, if they only have a name, then what I have to do is I have to go, I have to find the case, the court number, find out, what, because we cover 5 counties, what county it's in, what lawyers are involved, and then I'll send one of these out. And it's similar to this. It's not this exactly, but I'll send one to Judge Alpers, one to Mike Walton if it's in Scott County. I'll send one to Howard Thomas, who's the district court administrator, and then I'll send one to the defense attorney. And at that time, if anybody has any objection to it, I believe they let Judge Alpers know. We usually try to get that information in like 14 days before court starts, but that doesn't always happen, but that's what we try to do. And so it's a bit of a process trying to get information, but a lot of times the district court administrator, Howard Thomas, is always very helpful to me and Judge Alpers in getting me information so that I can apply for cameras in the courtroom. But WQAD has what we call a AV mult box, which when bigger cases come in and we know that it's going to last a long time, I'll coordinate with them because they have the equipment. We'll bring that in, and then we'll try and coordinate days that people will take turns. Then all the other stations will bring recorders in, plug into the mult box, and we kind of go from there. Then everybody kind of has their own recording device there. We have just one camera in the courtroom, so we take turns doing that. Once again, with technology, the way it's changing, that box may now become obsolete. And so.
You spoke a little bit about the document, and Judge Alpers was kindly enough to kind of point me in the right direction of finding the document that you have, the media coordination forms. And did you want to take a couple moments to speak about that?
It'll take probably less than that. I will tell you that Mike is right. I think our form isn't exactly the same form, but it's I think essentially the same issues are raised in our form as are otherwise. And we are really meticulous about this. If we see that people are showing up with cameras for a courtroom, we need to be able to get in the file and see that this order is in place. There is some issue on this 14 days, obviously, as the case is initiated. And so what I think we still continue to do, I know we have done this in the past, is we do people's initial appearances if they're held in the jail on video camera. So we have made that video available to local stations when I mean, you couldn't have the order, it just happened the day before or the night before, so that we still can make that available to you. I cannot emphasize enough that Mike is very responsible, and as he says, he is personally, he'll come down to the courthouse and see that everything is where it should be and ask if the people who are running the equipment have any questions, and he gets them all on the right track, and that's a great help to us. With regard to the 2 attachments beyond the media coordinator's application, we also have an opportunity by virtue of these forms for a party to object to expanded media coverage and objection of a witness to expanded media coverage. Mike Walton and I were talking a little bit before we got started, and we really think that this is just almost non-existent. If there are issues for witnesses or parties, we usually manage to work that out before something has to be done about it. I can recall in one case that I did a long time ago, there was actually teenagers were involved in this matter. The defendant was a teenager, and 2 people who were with him were called as significant witnesses. One of the young fellows, his dad didn't want him to be pictured, and I think we did work something out short of saying, well, we're not going to have any photography, we just agreed that we wouldn't photograph him. And the other circumstance was that we had a witness in that same case. One of the teenagers' dads was in a witness protection program. And now this was in Cedar County, which it kind of occurs to me would probably be a really good place to be in a witness protection program. For anybody who's familiar, it's a nice rural county with, you know, nice little towns and stuff. That would be pretty ideal, I think. But at any rate, we don't really have a lot of circumstances, apparently, where people object to the use of the camera. And honestly, I think it's somewhat becoming a function of the time. People expect that they will have be photographed when they're in large cities, on the street, or in, you know, public places, that sort of thing. So it really has not been.
Question for all of you. There's been talk about a possible pilot program in the state of Illinois with looking at possibly allowing cameras in the courtrooms in a few instances. We recently had one over in Ottawa in the appeals court dealing with our former wonderful governor, Rod Blagojevich, and his court issues. What advice would you have for either Illinois newsrooms or Illinois judges, attorneys, courtrooms on, you know, what would be the best way to kind of start this program, or just kind of advice that you've gathered, some knowledge you've gathered over the years as being in the courtroom, if there's anything specific?
Well, I'll start by saying I think it's a good idea just to have some sort of working parameters, if not actual rules, so that everybody is operating the same way every day, and no matter where they've come in from. Because if you have too many different things going on, I think that could get you off to a bad start.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think if you even looked at Iowa Rule of Court 25, any other state, it's a good model. I'm not sure where Iowa got it from. I presume another state. I find it very workable. As I said, I can't think in the 22 years that I've been doing this, I can't think of a single objection. I think from the prosecutor's standpoint, the rule covers my concerns as far as what can and can't be done. Getting back to what Mike said, I think as far as the media is concerned, of course, what you hear is nobody wants the trial to be turned into a media circus. I can tell you, as a prosecutor, I have to put on the trial for the most part. I'm the one who produces the witnesses at court. I'm the one who has to produce the evidence, and that's hard enough to do without concern about the media. And what's nice in Scott County, in my experience, is the media coordinates very well together. They work very well together, and that makes them invisible. We don't have 5 different cameras swooping on a witness as soon as they walk into the hallway, or me every time at a recess or something. It's all very orderly, it's all very cooperative, and that makes it, the production of it, pretty much invisible, and therefore it doesn't interfere with the trial, and we don't have claims that the trial has become a media circus of any kind. And I think that has made it very workable.
I'd have to agree with Mike. I think all the media here in the Quad City area, they do work well together. We communicate well, and therefore eliminating problems that may occur. I think at times, at one time, you know, we're using videotape. Now everybody is in different formats now with HD, and that's something that we're just getting into now. The things that we're going to have to address. One thing that has come up in the past, and Judge Alpers usually has a annual get-together with all the media to discuss any problems, any, you know, she just likes to get all the media together, just kind of, you know, to talk. One thing in the past that we've talked about is technology. Now we're allowed one camera, one video camera in the courtroom, and 2 still cameras in the courtroom. But now most every still camera has video. You have video. You can shoot video. So those are things that in the future that we'll probably are going to have to discuss. And we've had some discussion, but now with the different stations going to different formats, sharing the video, it could be a little more difficult. I think just recently, and I know Heather's here, they're very good about taking their turn in shooting video, and they shared with our with WQAD, and I think they were able to get some stuff in a timely fashion. So KWQC wasn't in on that particular one, so I don't know how that went.
I think one thing that we're looking at doing is using like some FTP sites and trying to share the video that way. You know, that might actually even speed things up, because I know making those tape dubs took quite a while. So, you know, once we all get used to it, it might actually end up being a little bit easier if we're able to share on some FTP sites and things like that.
Because I remember a case where I actually was at Channel 8 and was over at Channel 4 waiting on a tape dub.
Yeah,
and it was one of those things, you know, it was an afternoon court case. I think it may have been the court case regarding Pacino Hill, possibly, who was a career kind of offender. Is that the best way to say it? Maybe, I don't know. Pacino Hill is someone who tends to be in the courts from time to time, and
Not for a long time now.
not for a long time now, no.
He's on hiatus.
But it was an afternoon hearing, and Channel 8 was kind of, I think we were short-staffed that day. They had sent me to the courtroom to take notes for our station. Channel 4 was shooting, and I had to run over to Channel 4 to get the tape, and I had my newsroom calling me, is the tape ready? And it was one of the, just because of being an afternoon court session and then having to make the tape dub to a different format, it took time. And it's one thing, an FTP site would be a great way to expedite that process. And Mike, you kind of led into a topic that I wanted to talk about of, you know, growing technologies. You know, we are seeing changing technologies with HD, with still cameras that shoot video, and one of the local papers here, here at the Quad City Times, has a tendency to also bring in a chat feed that way you can watch the court proceedings via a chat. I know they've done it with a couple court cases, I think in the 7th District, and other papers. Waterloo Courier, I believe, did it with the high-profile case of the high school football coach that was unfortunately killed in front of his team. You know, are we seeing more and more of this type of thing, these live events, and what does the future hold from a media coordinator or a courtroom standpoint?
Well, that's happened a few times where I've had to make a request for somebody who wanted to blog actually inside the courtroom, and I'm not sure whether that was allowed or not. And this was in, I believe, in Clinton County. But it, boy, I don't know if that was allowed.
I think we've had answers both ways.
I think the Times has had a live feed, it seems to me. I don't remember what the case, but it seems to me she had a live, she was live. I don't remember if she was just typing on the blog live or if it was actually being filmed. And I could be thinking of just kind of press conferences too, but it seems to me it has been done.
We have permitted blogging at least for 2 individual reporters who I felt confident would not be drawing attention to what they were doing. That's always our concern, that the person who's there from the media becomes the focus of the attention versus the trial proceeding itself. And so I think it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. And I will tell you that the Supreme Court in Iowa, which has lots and lots of work to do, is taking this as one of the matters that they're going to look at. We definitely need an update on our Rule 25, our Chapter 25 of the rules, because there are so many media changes since this was written so many years ago, and so the court will be addressing some additional technology and how we can integrate that too.
Judge, do you think that if reporters were simply taken out of the courtroom but still given access to all of what is going on, that would be something that could allay the fear that allowed, camera or typing on a keyboard?
It might be. I mean, that would certainly be something to request of the judge, suggest, well, what if I were outside the courtroom and I was able, if we've already got the media stuff in place, so that you could be back where that's going on. That'd be okay.
In Scott County, typically there's one cameraman in the courtroom and all the reporters are in a room off to the side viewing the proceedings. So you don't have all the reporters coming in and out of the courtroom. The reporters, for the most part, are generally in a room watching the feed, and then they're free to come and go outside and do their live shots and all of that. But generally it's just one or two cameramen generally.
The question that just struck me from your opening comments, I want to know, do you guys think we get it right? When we cover the story, do you think that we get the court, or are we just there for when somebody curses or the grisly details of a murder? We get it right or we get it wrong? Do we miss the story?
From my standpoint, to get it right, you would pretty much have to broadcast the entire proceedings, because if in a general newscast you're going to get a very short portion of one witness's testimony, and we've had evidence all day long. So generally I think you get it right if it's live, that's what that person said, but it's very hard, I think, to capture the entire proceedings when the only part shown is a very, very small part of that proceeding.
Judge?
Yeah, I would say something similar. I think that a reporter who comes in and writes a piece for the newspaper probably has more opportunity to write about with real focus on what they saw and heard. As if it's on TV or the radio, it's going to be really a snippet of what happened in the whole day. I don't have any complaints specifically about people getting it wrong, though. I think people do a good job of capturing what they see and hear. It's just that might be just a tiny bit of what the big picture is.
Would you suggest then that TV stations or radio stations or whatever do post the full proceedings on maybe the website or something like that?
Well, like I say, if a trial goes 3 or 4 days, that's a long, and you know, again, I understand a lot of it probably isn't necessarily of interest. It's just a hard thing. If the person, if the media captures the right stuff, it's going to tell the story. I find sometimes that, for instance, if a reporter shows up for one witness, and this is written, newspaper reporters too, they may show up for one witness, and the next day in the paper, that's the part you read in the paper, what that one witness said, and that may distort what actually happened in court that day. And I think the only way you prevent that is have a reporter spend more time in the courtroom so that reporter understands the entire proceedings. But again, I know that gets down to resources and time and that kind of thing too.
Have you ever found yourself wanting to have a conversation with a reporter, say at the Dispatch Argus, the Quad City Times, or at one of the local TV stations, because of that type of thing, where you maybe afterwards, maybe 6 months down the road, and they covered a case one way, and you may have, wish you had talked to them about the way they covered it, or do you stay, do you kind of separate yourself from that?
I separate I don't tell them what I think they should have reported.
What percentage of the time is there a media, a camera in the courtroom, just generally speaking, in a given cycle? I mean, over 6 months or a year, is it in there 1% of the time, or 10 or 20?
It's a very small percent of the time. I can't remember any civil cases specifically, although I know they have been covered. And criminal cases, it's typically only cases that are very high profile. The charge is very serious. It's a Class A felony. Somebody's looking at life in prison. Or it might be something that has a person that's well known in the Quad Cities, such as Pacino Hill. So, I mean, I think that the camera in the courtroom is used still only in a very narrow slice of cases.
So less than 5% of the time, or?
I would say 5% of the time, maybe 10. I think 10% would be pretty ambitious.
And would the request for access with media also apply to, like, say, a simple misdemeanor or a bench trial that's civil, not criminal?
If you want to have expanded media coverage, the same thing applies to every type of case. Now, there are some cases that are eliminated from this by virtue of their type of case, and I did want to mention that too, if I can find it here. There's no coverage in any juvenile, dissolution, adoption, child custody, or trade secret cases unless there can be consent on the record. So, I mean, that is, if you added all of those together, that's quite a few cases that would be coming through our court systems.
Senator Grassley, so I'm sorry.
Heather?
The last media gathering that you had, I know that you had talked about the fact that there were very few cases that were covered, and I think that some of the judges there were saying that they actually wish the cameras were there more often to show people, to show the public how the court system works. Is that true? Would you like to see more of these cases covered?
I think that it is true that people can learn from what's going on, but I think also, you have to look at it as Mike Walton said. If you cover only a tiny little, you film all day, but you only cover a tiny little bit of it, or you write just about something that's limited in terms of the big picture, it probably has less value than if somebody's actually there. I'll tell you, I always hope that somebody will come and sit in and watch trials. We have lots of trials that are open completely to the public, and people don't do that. They used to. Back in the 80s when I first got started, there were people who, maybe were retired or something and came down and looked at the trials, but that's pretty unusual. Most people have no clue what we do in a trial, and they have a very distorted view, if any, because they watch TV shows about trials, which don't really represent anything we do for the most part.
I've noticed a big change in my 22 years, and that is 20 years ago, every murder that went on, every murder trial that went on in Scott County was news. And most of the time there were reporters in the courtroom for most of those trials. That's changed significantly. There's a lot of murder trials that receive very little coverage, if any at all, and other serious crimes. And for a reporter to be present for large portions of that trial is very uncommon also.
I would have to agree. Years ago, I mean, we would have a reporter, if it was a week-long trial, we'd have a reporter there every single day, a reporter and a photographer outside the courtroom, and that would be their assignment for the day. But now, that just doesn't, you know, with shorter or not enough staff with some folks, that just doesn't happen anymore. I definitely would have to agree with Mike on that trials aren't covered as extensively as they were years ago.
It dawns on me, it was 10 years ago, I was part of the committee to help on this very same issue here in Illinois with this group. And back then, a lot of the opponents of expanded media coverage in Illinois would bring up time and again, without fail, the OJ case. Has enough time passed now, do you think? Do you guys that are in Illinois, you're still hearing opponents bring this up? For those of you that are on the panel, has enough time passed in the profession? Because it wasn't just from media people bringing that up, but also a lot of attorneys were concerned that they would have, again, you mentioned the media circus, but that case in particular seemed to really be a sticking point for a lot of people in the legal profession. Is that still the case? Have we finally got enough time, enough water under the bridge to move away from that?
I'm not sure exactly what, I don't know that the media was blamed or given credit, whichever way you want to look at it, for what happened in the O.J. Simpson trial. There was a lot of, I think, criticisms about the way that case was handled. So I don't know that, at least in my mind, that O.J. was any sort of watershed on this particular issue. Again, I think the main concern anyone has is that the media, the reporters in that distract from what is actually we're trying to accomplish in the courtroom, which is the presentation of evidence.
For Mike Walton, being a prosecuting attorney, do you see if you have the case streaming live that could hinder the potential of a retrial to get more jurors in the case? Because with like the retrial of Blagojevich going on and how outspoken he is to get fair and impartial juries?
That is always a concern, but I found through the years that, and my only experience in this is in Scott County, that it really isn't too difficult to find jurors who, if they have seen something about it in the media, understand that that's separate from what goes on in the courtroom. And we don't have too much of that concern. Only one time have I asked local media not to cover something because I thought it would be so prejudicial that it would significantly hinder the ability to proceed and would possibly cause a mistrial and starting over and all that. And that request was not honored. I didn't demand it or anything, I just suggested. And I've never, that's the only time in 22 years that I've ever said, I really wish that you would hold off on this, not that never report it, but just hold off on this because it could impact the trial, and it didn't in that case. But so generally, no, we don't, jurors nowadays, they're gonna have access to that information, and you have to trust that, again, that they will focus on what they're told to focus on, and that is the evidence, and I think in Scott County they do.
It's been a long time since I worked in Sioux City years and years ago, so I forget if county attorneys and judges are elected in Iowa. In Illinois, I know they are. And prosecutors, you can ask them whatever you want. Judges, you don't really get to ask, how would you deal with this? What's your record? It's almost a nice guy contest. Having the camera in the courtroom, are you guys both elected? Do you face the voters at all? Or?
I am.
You are?
I'm on a retention ballot only.
Do you think that whatever limited exposure it is, helps, hurts, could possibly help when you face the voters? Do people know any more about you since they've seen you in the courtroom? Do you fear that they're getting the wrong impression if you know, we only get a snippet?
You know, I don't think for Iowa judges who are up for retention, I don't think it probably makes a difference. I think that voters get their information from lots of sources, and if they saw you conducting a trial and were brilliant at it or were terrible at it, I don't think it probably would make any difference unless you were really terrible and blatantly terrible lots of times. I think it wouldn't make a difference probably in Iowa.
And again, we're talking the cases that are covered are maybe 5% or so it's a very small percentage of what I do. I think my TV time is very limited.
Yeah, but if you win 95% and lose 5%, but one of those is a murder, child death, something, and you lose it and it's on TV, does that unfairly paint the picture of you as a prosecutor?
But that's going to occur whether the cameras are in the courtroom or not. I mean, that's going to be reported whether they're in the courtroom or not. I mean, I've been doing this long enough, I feel fairly comfortable in a courtroom, so I would welcome cameras. You know, I think it would probably help me. I don't want to sound conceited or anything. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time and it's what I do. I suppose if you were so horrible in a courtroom and that was on the news, well then maybe the public needs to see that. So I don't see that as a political issue for me one way or the other. I don't think that up to this point it's impacted enough. The media tends to focus on the defendant and the witnesses. And so you might hear my voice asking a question or something, but generally I'm not going to be the focus of what actually gets on the TV.
This is a question for Mike from Channel 6. Because you can cover the Illinois side and the Iowa side, do you find yourself in your newsroom paying more attention to cases in Iowa because you know you're going to have more access and your story is going to turn out better? And for high-profile Illinois cases, what's your strategy when you know you're stuck outside the courtroom?
That going to Iowa does, I mean, obviously, if we're showing audio and video of a court case in Iowa, we tend to do that more. I mean, otherwise, in Illinois, we only end up getting, you know, the prosecutor, talking to the prosecutor or a family. I would have to say that maybe, yes, that we do cover more Iowa cases than Illinois. And in cases of high profile in Illinois, there again, years ago, we used to do a lot more where we would put a reporter and a photographer on a case in Illinois, and now that doesn't, it seems now that we're holding back and we're waiting for suddenly a verdict in a case. And then that's when we end up sending somebody over there to get a small, you know, talk to the prosecutor or a family member. That seems to be more what's happening now than years ago, where we would put somebody on that case, and whether it was Illinois or Iowa, we would put somebody on that case, and if it lasted a week, they would be on that an entire week, and they would report on that. But now it just seems like now, especially in Illinois, since we can't get any cameras in the courtroom, we sort of hold off and kind of just do one thing at the end that, you know, there's a verdict. So I would have to say that we do probably, because of cameras in the courtroom, cover more
Last question for me, I promise. Let me follow up on Jacob's question, Mike and Judge. What would you say to Illinois reporters? Give us a little professional advice, since we don't have the video, the sound bites that are going to come from courtroom coverage. What should we do on this side of the river? How could we tell that story if we're not going to have some of those elements?
I guess let me just clarify. You mean so that you can get it in the courtroom later?
No.
And show you're responsible, or how you tell the story?
The story in Iowa, you're going to have the video. You're going to have those sound bites of a witness statement or of question and answer from the prosecutor. But in Illinois, it's a picture of the outside of the building and somebody standing in front of it saying, "In court today." How do you make up for the elements that you just simply don't have in Illinois because we can't? It's me reading, and then the witness said, and then the prosecutor said. What are some of the other things some of the other tools, some of the other areas we could go to find information to help round out coverage of the court?
Well, the problem is attorneys are very limited in what they can say. Certainly, I think defense attorneys are much more limited. I can talk about the general things involving a case. I think I can talk about some of the evidence that actually was presented. I think if you're respecting, there's people that just don't want to be on camera, and we all know that. And I think if you're respecting that, and you're interviewing people who involved but are willing to talk, I think that's kind of how you tell the story. I think a big part of it is having reporters who are knowledgeable, at least to some extent, about the case. I can tell you I've had reporters sit down with me and say, "Now tell me what happened." And that to me is, again, where do I start? We've been doing this for 3 or 4 days. You want me to start at the beginning? I much appreciate a reporter who's asking questions pertinent to the case. I like to discuss with reporters off camera a little bit about what they're going to ask, so that we're on the same page, and that I'm responding to cogent questions. That it's not that blank stare of, "What did you just ask?" So I guess that would be my main thing, is have reporters that are knowledgeable asking good questions, and you're going to get good information.
And to follow up on that, in Iowa, there are documents within a criminal court file that are kept as confidential, but the file itself is generally an open file. So that's one of the things that I would recommend, is that the reporter go and ask if they can see the criminal file. They'll be told you can't get into this envelope, which has the confidential things in it, but you could go in and kind of at least walk your way through, see what the background is, what is the charge, what does that entail. I think that would be useful.
You can do that once the trial's begun, or that's open document?
The criminal file is open as soon as the case is open. So, but as I said, a lot of the meaty stuff is in the confidential minutes of testimony, which are in an envelope. But that means you can still go through. You can see what motions are on file. You can see, generally what the charge is against the person and what the general allegations are. And that's a great starting point.
Heather and then Michelle. I just wondered, reporters in Illinois are hoping to have cameras in the courtrooms sooner rather than later. What advice would you give for reporters who aren't used to working in the courtroom with cameras? What are the biggest mistakes you see reporters in Iowa making with cameras in the courtrooms that you wouldn't, things you wouldn't advise reporters to do?
Well, honestly, I have to say we have had very few issues or problems that I'm aware of since I've been the chief, and I might not have been aware of those going on before that. I think that, with the Iowa system, where you only have the one camera and you have your reporters who are probably in an adjacent room, I would say that we really haven't had a lot of problems. So I can't really tell people what to avoid, because I think our rules work to give the reporters access to the information. and, you know, not being problematic. As I said, the real issue for me is I don't ever want the jury to get focused on somebody in the courtroom who is not a part of the, you know, the lawyers or the witnesses up front. And that would be, anything that anybody's doing to be disruptive would not be helpful.
With the staff limitations that radio and television and even newspaper now have, typically the day of the trial and things like that, if you're not able to get there every day, is there any kind of summary every day that comes out of the court? Probably not, right?
No.
Okay.
Jacob?
This is kind of piggybacking off Michelle's question, but I don't know if this is a question or observation, but I do believe that cameras in the courtroom in Illinois is a good thing, and it would be good for Illinois newsrooms. But I'm also not convinced that Illinois newsrooms are in a position to take advantage of the law to our full potential. Because Mike, you even said in your newsroom, now when you used to send someone every day, 5 days a week, reporter and photographer, so many newsrooms in Illinois cannot afford to do that. And so while the law might be available, I mean, how do we position ourselves to take advantage of it in Illinois when so many markets in Illinois, 2 stations are now 1, they're downsizing, there are fewer people covering more stories. So I think it's a law worth fighting for in Illinois, but I think we have to talk about how to take advantage of it, doing more work with less people. Yeah, I don't think that was a question. You don't have to answer that.
But that's the thing. I mean, and to be honest, that is why a lot of times I got to make sure that new reporters know what they need to do before they set foot into that courthouse. And sometimes I'll get a gut feeling that maybe this person doesn't know what might be going on. I probably need to get down there and to at least show somebody where they need to be. You know, where they you know, what they have to do. Every now and then, I mean, even a veteran, I was in a courtroom one day, a small courtroom covering something, and a veteran still photographer went in and just started snapping pictures, and you're supposed to have a bag over that so you don't hear the click. The judge threw him out and then pointed at me and said, you know, so, you know, I'm sort of, you know, he was pointing at me because, you know, either I didn't recognize that he was, you know, snapping pictures, but I mean, those kinds of things happen. And so, you know, whenever I get a gut feeling that maybe somebody doesn't know, I try and get down there right away, because like I said before, that's the last thing that these folks need to be worried about.
Maybe from a little different perspective, analyzing this whole process, isn't the entire term allow cameras in the courtroom antithetical to the Bill of Rights and fundamental premise that the government serves the people, not the other way around? And let me give you a couple examples. What if the defense wanted to record their proceedings just of their own volition, and they weren't, quote, news media? Or what if somebody that didn't meet the criteria, which I'm not sure what the criteria is for news media on this document, wanted to have access to the courtroom to record it, whether it was audio or video? That process is I mean, what would happen?
Well, if just anybody could come in and record anything, and of course, cell phone is an example, that person doesn't know the rules. That person may be videotaping a sex abuse victim. You could have a sex abuse victim look out in the audience, and again, you got to understand how hard it is for a sex abuse victim to walk into a courtroom and give details about a crime like that, let alone to look out there and see somebody videotaping their testimony, or the victim of any crime to look out and see some stranger videotaping them, not knowing who it is. We've had in the complaints, confidential informants testifying who said they saw somebody videotaping them with the camera. You know, the court, I think, has an obligation to assure a fair trial. That's also a constitutional right. And I think it has always been recognized that a judge has not only right, but a duty to control the courtroom. And you know, to have people bringing in their own video cameras and you know, filming anything they want and filming jurors, I think would be very disruptive and would very much jeopardize a fair trial for both sides.
What would happen if it was not an exempted case, not one of those examples where it was sex abuse and all that you were talking about, but the defense said, we'd like to bring a camera in to record the proceedings? What would happen?
I would say they'd be told no, because I think that we have this rule, and we use the rule, and I think, to me, unless everybody else in the room and a jury was not involved said, this is okay, we're in agreement with this, I don't think as a judge I have the authority to let somebody be in there when I know this rule exists and the person is there and doesn't have any kind of an order which permits them to.
And the differential is that they're not news media, and they're not making this application?
I think that this covers everybody.
Okay.
I think this covers
So could the
this rule
so could the
covers
defense fill this out and move through with this process?
You know, if they did do that, I don't know who, I would say that it wouldn't work, because I think that the rules are not set out that an individual party can make this request. It's for the media to make the request.
And this one's for Mike. Kind of like, you might have like answered like some of it earlier, but what advice can you give for students who haven't really covered any court cases? Like here in the Alpers, we've been seeing more and more like court cases of stuff happening. What advice can you give us as a reporter for covering that? Like, what do you want out of the story?
For Mike Walton or Mike Ortiz, or either?
Mike Ortiz.
Okay.
One thing I always, I guess, I mean, you know when there's a camera in the courtroom that camera is always on. I would say stay close to that camera. Make sure that whatever you're listening closely. As a photographer, or as a former photographer and now going to be another photographer, I always say listen with your eyes and your ears. You know, that's an important thing. You know, if you hear something that you're paying attention to something and there's some sort of testimony that you know you want to make sure that was recorded. Jot down the time. I don't know, it's kind of difficult. That takes experience. A lot of times, some testimony can be boring, and sometimes you kind of drift away. But if you're paying close attention, there are things in there that you know. That can be good. I always say listen with your eyes and your ears. So you know if you have a camera in there that's going to be recording you know, a certain testimony that is important to writing a good story.
My advice would be prepared, especially if you're younger. In any profession, you're going to have to spend more time learning a lot of the background stuff that through years you know already. But you're going to have to spend more time researching things, getting into the court file, looking at the court file, and that's going to help you put things in context so that what you're reporting, I think, makes sense.
And I would say too that, you know, if you know that's going to be your beat, or that you're going to be covering, you know, cases here or there, that you make an appointment with the state's attorney, if you can, talk to a judge before any typical case comes in, and kind of go over that courthouse and find out where things are, and what the best processes are, so that when you go in, you don't feel totally foreign and you're comfortable with the situation.
That's a good point. I mean, like I say, a lot of times, you know, I get that gut feeling that somebody doesn't know what's going on. It's always good to kind of show them where they can be, where a camera can be in that courtroom, because in Scott County, you can't have any kind of electronic devices in that courthouse. When we fill this out, that gives us a camera in the courtroom, and then we also have somebody downstairs. Now, before, it was only allowed that we could only have a camera on the first floor. Now, that is not the case. You can't have a camera anywhere, any kind of recording device in Scott County. So you basically have to have a camera outside that courthouse. So knowing kind of the rules, and like she said, you know, get familiar with the courthouse, what, you know, where you can be, where you can't be, and you know, take a trip into one of the courtrooms is also helpful.
A lot of times the new reporters, when they just start the court beat, will come in and say hello and introduce themselves. I think that's a really good idea, so that the judge knows who you are. And many of the judges are open to answering questions. So say hello, introduce yourself.
We got time just for a couple more questions. Heather? Go ahead.
For Mike Ortiz, you said that you've got the feed that goes into like the media room. With the electronics not being permitted in the court, with the media request, can you get like a cell phone in there so you can send updates to the studio, or do you have to step out of the courthouse to update the studio?
That's kind of a gray area.
Do you want me to close my ears?
That's kind of a gray area, because it allows us to have cameras in the courtroom, but it doesn't allow us to have cell phones. That, you'd have to go outside. I mean, to be honest with you, that is not allowed. And I don't think, if I did see somebody with one, I would definitely ask them to turn it off. And in Scott County, we have a small area where if we set up, it's different. Different cases, we have different kind of equipment, you know. CBS 4 may be interested in a case. They it's just one person that sets up their camera. We don't have that mult box in the media area. They shoot it, and if somebody asks for it, they'll share it with somebody else. But in a high-profile case, if we think that, okay, you know, we got 4 stations and some newspapers and radio stations that are interested in this case, then we'll set up a mult box, you know, and, you know, radio stations will come in, you know, with their recorders. All the different stations will come in with their recorders, and everybody will set up in the same area. But in smaller cases, it may be just an individual station that will set up one camera and record, and you're pretty much at the mercy of whatever they recorded that day, you'll get a copy of.
Your final question?
Yeah, I wondered if you could tell us what you think the benefits of having cameras in the courts in Iowa are for the public.
Well, I think the obvious benefit is that people will have ability to know what's happening in a courtroom in cases that they're interested in or might not even know about otherwise. And they do have the, you can know about the case on a little bit more personal level if you can see it on TV, even just a clip of it or something like that. So I think it's generally a good thing. it helps to let people know that what the courts are doing. It's such a small, tiny bit of our business, but it does give them a view for some of the things we do.
Thank you. Would you like to share any parting words by chance?
Well, I feel like I've covered everything I know and then some here today on this topic, but I guess I would just say that following up on what I said earlier, we do recognize that technology has changed a lot, so I expect that the Iowa expanded media coverage rule will be also changed and altered in a way that hopefully tries to keep up with innovation in the media. I would also say that the issue of bringing electronic devices into our courthouse was an issue that was addressed because we had jurors who felt they were being photographed in the courtroom because you can bring a camera in and a pen anymore, or you can record things, or if you have a small telephone, you can take video. So we're already responding to that at the courthouse, is that we trying to keep everything safe and people feeling secure about being a witness or a party or a juror at a trial. So we think it works well, and we're hoping that we'll continue to feel that way about it.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, and also as technology advances, I think that actually is better for this issue of cameras in the courtroom, because the cameras are becoming smaller, they're quieter. As you get to wireless things, you don't have wires running all over and those issues, so I think it can only get better as technology improves.
I would have to agree with what both of them are saying. Technology is changing, and we have to change with the times. And now with all 3 stations here in the Quad Cities that have gone HD, we're definitely going to have to come up with a format to where we can share things, and the FTP site is probably what we'll end up going to. So.
I want to thank my panelists. Thank you so much for coming. This is obviously a topic that is near and dear to our hearts.